Picture a server 8:47 at night. A message blinks in the dark like a redstone lamp nobody asked for. No reply. Another at 9:15. Silence thick as bedrock. The world hums, torches flicker, but the player simply will not respond. This is not laziness. This is a choice carved deliberately into stone. Tonight we descend into why an entire generation walked away from the machine and never came back. The manager earns 6 figures and holds equity, shimmering like enchanted diamond armor. The young employee earns 44,000, no adjustment since spawn, no shine on their iron. 3 messages sent into the void, each more urgent, each unanswered. Next month, the leadership offsite will whisper about a work ethic problem, but the real glitch lives deeper, beneath the surface blocks, in the code of the deal itself. Dig with me. Here is the truth most refuse to mine. Gen Z is not soft, not broken by participation trophies. When you read the actual numbers and the incentive structure buried below, their refusal is boringly, beautifully rational. The fact that it looks insane to older players reveals something chilling about how the economics of this world quietly shifted while the rules on the sign stayed exactly the same. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Hold one image in your mind for this entire journey. A vending machine. Old, dented, humming too loud in an empty break room lit by a single flickering torch. You feed it a coin. Something drops. That was the deal. Be reachable. Go the extra mile. Show dedication. The coin bought a raise, a promotion, stability, a future. The machine worked, so people kept feeding it again and again, never questioning the hum. Then, somewhere between the late 90s and now, the machine stopped giving things back, but nobody hung an out of order sign. It still hummed. It still glowed. The manager still stood beside it whispering, just feed it, trust the process. Older players obeyed out of habit, out of memory, out of a faith they could not see had rotted. The machine looked perfect. Inside, the gears had turned to dust and cobweb. Then Gen Z walked up. They watched another player feed a coin into the slot. They watched nothing drop. They watched the slot swallow the coin whole, like a mob disappearing into the void. And they simply said, no thanks. That is the entire story. Everything else is detail, lore, mechanics. But to truly understand the refusal, we must travel back to when the machine still paid out its glittering rewards. Return to the post-war world, the late 1940s into the 60s. The corporate model was forged like a netherite ingot built on one specific trade. You gave the company your time, your loyalty, your presence, your availability. You did not watch the clock. You stayed late, took the weekend calls, and in return, the company gave you something extraordinary, something that now sounds like a myth told by torchlight to frighten children. They gave you security, defined pensions, guaranteed retirement, long contracts, promotions that tracked your seniority like experience points, filling a bar, healthcare, raises that kept pace with inflation, the chance to spend 30 years in one place and walk out with enough to truly stop. The coin in, coin out math was real. The hum of the machine was honest. Sacrifice your evenings, receive stability. A fair trade sealed in the dark. Now here is what almost no one speaks of, because it crept in slowly, and we are blind to slow changes the way we ignore a creeper approaching from behind. That trade began collapsing in the 1980s. The pension vanished, replaced by a self-managed account that sounds equal but is not. The risk silently transferred from the company onto your own shoulders, heavy as a stack of anvils, and you never signed for it. The company once carried the investment risk and promised you a fixed payment. After, you carried it yourself and prayed the market cooperated. Prayed like a player at midnight, hoping no phantom spawn. That is not the same deal. It is a fundamentally different contract. Yet the language stayed identical. The performance reviews, the dedication speeches, the annual loyalty rituals, all hummed on, unchanged, while the foundation quietly crumbled into the void below. Then the 90s arrived, and downsizing became a strategy, not a last resort. Companies began treating mass layoffs as a signal of efficiency, a flex for shareholders. The stock price climbed when 10,000 jobs were cut, like a leaderboard ticking up as villagers vanished. The company's side of the loyalty equation simply evaporated. But the expectation of loyalty from employees remained, demanded, enforced. This is the first crack splitting through the machine. You still feed the coin. The machine no longer guarantees an output. And here lives a psychological mechanism, dark and quiet, that kept the rotting deal alive. Call it deferred justification. When the reward is delayed, when it demands years before you glimpse return, you become easy prey to having the deal changed mid-game. You have invested too much to walk away, so you rationalize feeding more. The structure leverages this automatically. Think of a casino or a loot chest that pays out only sometimes. Slot machines drip rewards unpredictably because variable reinforcement is the most addictive pattern known to behavioral science. The availability culture ran on this same dark redstone. Occasionally someone got promoted. Occasionally staying late paid off. Not reliably, but enough to keep the behavior alive. The machine was broken, but never fully silent. It still made noise, and noise in the dark becomes hope. Gen Z grew up watching this happen to their parents. That is not a small thing. They watched parents grind 60, 70-hour weeks across their whole childhoods, then get cut at 52 with a severance that lasted 4 months. They watched them defer vacations, defer health, defer everything for a machine that one day sent a cold message from HR. The children observed the outcome. They ran the numbers, and they updated. This is not a personality flaw. It is a clean update of belief based on evidence. You observe the data. You revise your model of the world. You act accordingly. Gen Z's model of work is simply more accurate than the inherited script handed to them by people who learned the rules inside a machine that actually functioned. They are not rebelling against reality. They are the only ones who finally read it correctly in the dark. Let us leave the abstract and dig into raw numbers. The bedrock of this story. Meet Marcus, 23, a new corporate job at $48,000 a year. His manager holds an unwritten expectation, never in any contract, that good employees stay reachable after hours. Check the messages in the evening. Reply by 9. Marcus complies because he is a good player who values his spawn point. Now let us calculate the true cost. 45 minutes each weekday evening checking and replying. That is roughly 3 hours, 45 minutes a week, times 50 working weeks, because people do this even on vacation, equals about 187 hours a year. At his effective rate of 23 an hour, that is roughly $4,300 of uncompensated labor annually every year, draining like sand from an hourglass nobody flips back. And the number grows as he climbs, because senior players draw more after-hours demands, not fewer. Over a 10-year career, with modest raises and the expectations scaling up, we reach roughly $55,000 to $60,000 in uncompensated labor. Conservatively, that is not a rounding error. That is a car, a down payment on a house in a secondary market, the seed capital for a real position that could compound into something living. What does Marcus get back? 3% the first year, 2.5% the second, budget constraints, 4% in year 3, but only after he threatened to leave. Nothing in year 4 restructuring, 3% in year 5. His salary crawled from $48,000 to roughly $55,000. Inflation ate most of it. In real purchasing power, he may have broken even or slid backward into the dark, holding only the wrapper. So the math is brutal. Negative $60,000 in uncompensated output and a real wage gain somewhere between 0 and barely positive. The machine ate the coin and handed back the wrapper. But here is the system's truth, cold as deep slate. Marcus is not being victimized by one bad manager. The manager is no villain, no Herobrine in the walls. The manager simply responds to an incentive that makes invisible extraction the rational move. The cost of that extraction is invisible on every balance sheet. Nobody measures it. It is externalized onto the employee as a social and psychological weight, showing up nowhere in the efficiency metrics. This is the rule. Attack incentives, never individuals. The manager is not evil, only responding to a system where invisible extraction is the smart play. Fix the incentives and the behavior dies. Gen Z, knowingly or not, is forcing the invisible to become visible. By refusing availability, they force the true cost of labor to become legible. If you want coverage at 8 at night, hire someone for 8, pay them, make it a real input and a real budget. Do not harvest it free from players too afraid to say no. That is not laziness, that is pricing. And pricing, once it surfaces from the dark, terrifies everyone who built their fortune on free inputs they never had to account for. Now the metaphor sharpens into a blade. I call it coin creep. The price of using the machine keeps rising while the output stays flat or shrinks, and it is invisible because each increment is small enough to swallow without protest. In the 80s, staying late was exceptional, rare, and rewarded. Then it became expected. Then expected became the baseline. Then baseline became just the job. The coin kept growing in the dark. Then just the job became, if you are not doing it, you are not a team player. Nobody explicitly agreed to this. It migrated through cultural norms, which is how the most effective extractions always work. You do not announce them. You simply adjust the ambient expectation until the new floor is accepted as natural. The same dark mechanic behind subscription creep, scope creep, and the landlord who quietly turns a 1,200 apartment into 1,400. Creep works because humans anchor to the current state and judge changes against it, not against the original agreement. Once a new norm sets, it becomes the floor, not an escalation. But Gen Z is among the first to have the language to name it. Not because they invented the concept, but because they grew up drowning in information density. The threads, the reviews, the anti-work forums gave them a shared vocabulary for a haunting their parents felt but could not speak. And here is the dark irony, almost funny. The very tools companies use to reach employees at 9 at night are the tools employees use to build collective understanding of why they should not respond at 9 at night. The technology meant to make workers more extractable made them more organized instead. Someone handed everyone a communication device assuming it would only flow one direction. A fascinating miscalculation echoing now through every empty inbox. But pause, because a fair objection rises from the dark. Is this not partly a career strategy question? Is not being the fast responder the one who shows up extra how you differentiate and climb? Is Gen Z harming itself by opting out? It is a fair question, and the honest answer is it depends on what game you are playing. And most players are grinding the wrong game entirely without ever knowing it. Learn this distinction or stay lost in the cave forever. There is strategic visibility and there is reactive availability. Strategic visibility is high impact, highly visible work at moments that truly move your path. Taking the project that puts you before leadership. Solving the problem everyone admitted was hard. Building a scarce, in-demand skill that compounds. That is a real return on the investment of your time and energy. An enchantment that lasts. Reactive availability is replying at 9. Always reachable. Always quick, always in the inbox. That carries near zero career return and a heavy lifestyle cost. And here lies the trap. People mistake reactive availability for strategic visibility. You feel like you are working, you feel seen, but you are only training everyone to see you as an always available resource, which means your time is valued at 0 at the margin because it is always there for the taking. Scarce things hold value. Abundant things do not. If you are infinitely available, your availability is worth nothing, like cobblestone in a world drowning in it. The players who advance fastest are not the most available. They are the most legible. People know clearly what they are good at, what they produce, what value they add. That legibility comes from the quality of work during hours, never from response time at 9 in the dark. So refusing after hours availability is not categorically bad strategy. It is bad only if you are not doing excellent, visible, impactful work during hours. It is fine if you are. The problem is many managers cannot tell the two apart because their proxies for a good employee were inherited from a pre-digital era where presence was genuinely hard to fake. In a remote, asynchronous world, those proxies are garbage, and everyone is slowly realizing it. Now descend to a deeper level, something the coverage almost never minds. The availability expectation is distributed with perfect asymmetry across income, and the asymmetry is almost designed to extract from those who can least afford the loss. The executive who messages at 9 often holds equity, ownership, a fortune genuinely chained to the company's ass. Their availability has a rational foundation. They tend their own garden, their own glowing crops in the dark. Now take the junior player, 44,000, no equity, no ownership, no stake in the companies. When they are available at 9, they feed a coin into a machine that gives no equity, no real raise, no security. The most optimistic output they can dream of is a slightly warmer review and maybe a faster promotion nudging 44 to 52. Maybe, if the budget allows. If the headcount exists, if their manager fights for them, if. The same behavior carries a completely different risk and return depending on where you stand in the structure, yet the cultural norm pretends it is identical for all. It is not. It was built by and for people with ownership stakes, then copy-pasted onto people who own nothing, and now it is enforced as a moral virtue instead of examined as an economic transaction. Gen Z saying no is not a collapse of professionalism. It is a correction of a category error. You think the problem is Gen Z's attitude toward work. The actual problem is a mismatch between the norms of a high ownership system and the material reality of a low ownership labor market. The attitude is downstream of the incentives. Fix the incentives and the attitude changes on its own, automatically like water finding its level. You do not need to fix the generation. You need to fix the deal buried at the root of the machine. And here comes the darkest part. The part that turns observation into something vital if you intend to build a life within. The availability norm actively harms those who comply most completely, not only because of the stolen time, but because of what it displaces. Every hour spent reactively available to someone else's agenda is an hour not spent building your own position, your own fortress, your own glowing stronghold in the endless night. In an era where the assets that compound wealth, skills, networks, investments, side income, equity, all demand deliberate, focused, non-reactive time, the opportunity cost of availability is measured not just in hours, but in the compounding you forfeit. Meet Jade. 50,000 a year, roughly 15 hours a week in a state of reactive availability. Not working, just available. Phone near, checking in. Monitoring, psychological rent paid to another's attention economy. Her leisure is contaminated. She cannot fully disengage, cannot fully focus on anything else, and her availability earns nothing. Redirect those 15 hours, and over a year you get 780 hours. 780 hours of deliberate skill building, deep learning, building a channel, a business, an investment practice, anything she owns, and that compounds. A meaningful asset left rotting on the table every single year, swallowed quietly by the dark. This is why I do not moralize about work-life balance. That framing bores me. I care because the math of compounding is ruthless, and the systems that eat your compounding hours do it without your awareness, like silverfish hollowing out stone you thought was solid. Once you see the mechanism, you can choose. Before you see it, you are simply being extracted quietly in the dark, one unflipped hourglass at a time. A case study, fictional but built on real patterns. 2 players, same job, same year, same starting salary, $46,000. Call them Daniel and Priya. Daniel does what is expected plus the invisible extra. Always on, always quick, first to volunteer for the after-hours call. Managers adore him. Decent reviews. Raises averaging 3%. By year 5, he reaches roughly $53,000, having given away 1,000 hours, worth near $30,000 in free labor. His network is mostly internal. His skills sharpened in one role but never diversified, because the reactive demands devoured his attention. Priya does excellent work during hours, precise, visible, high impact on what she chooses. She does not respond after 6. The hours Daniel pours into passive availability she spends differently, learning data skills above her role, writing for an industry newsletter that builds her external profile, investing $500 a month, automated, untouched, quietly compounding in the dark. By year 3, a competing offer arrives, drawn by her external visibility. She uses it to negotiate up to $64,000, far above market for her level. By year 5, she stands at $72,000. Her investment account, 30 months of $500 contributions at 8%, holds roughly $20,000. More importantly, she compounded career capital, network, and assets simultaneously. 3 flames burning where Daniel lit only one. Same start, same 5 years. Daniel sits at $53,000, mildly burned out, having given away $30,000 in labor. Priya stands at $72,000, $20,000 invested, a strong external identity, and energy still in her bar. Not because she worked harder, because she understood what the vending machine was truly giving back and made a different decision about where to drop her coins, while everyone else fed the dark. The point is not never be available. Availability is a form of capital expenditure. You spend it, and like any capital, the question is whether the return justifies the spend. Sometimes it does. The analyst who stays late to prep a board presentation that could earn a promotion is not a fool. They make a targeted high return investment. Context matters. Return structure matters. But in most junior roles today, the return is a void. Now the loyalty argument, whispered by older managers. When I was coming up, I was always available, and that is how I built my career. They are probably not lying. It was true in their world. The norm carried a real return. Their machine worked. The error is generalizing from a sample of one from a specific historical moment, applying it as universal law to a completely different set of conditions, a vivid memory mistaken for an eternal rule. Telling someone in this year to use the same coin you used decades ago is like telling them a defunct membership card still works. The machine stopped accepting it. That is not the card's fault. And consider the world Gen Z entered. They graduated into the pandemic. They watched entire industries evaporate in 6 weeks, watched loyal companies cut 30% of staff in a single recorded video from a CEO they had never even spoken to. They watched essential workers called heroes in public and handed pizza parties instead of real raises in private. They watched executive pay climb while base wages fell in real terms. And then the same companies hosting those layoff calls began asking those same young workers to be available in the evenings. The audacity is almost impressive, but let me add nuance, because pure victim narrative is boring and strategically useless in the dark. Here is what Gen Z gets wrong. The refusal is correct in principle, but often executed without strategy. And execution without strategy is just noise, like mining randomly and hitting only stone. The rational version sets clear boundaries, produces excellent work during hours, builds external assets with freed time, and knows when availability is actually worth the broken version opts out of one bad deal and opts into nothing at all. Average work during hours, refusing after hours, out of vibe rather than calculation, then confused when no promotion comes. The machine is broken, yes, but standing before it shouting is not how you get a snack. The correct move is to treat your attention and time as capital with the same discipline you apply to gold. Ask, what is the return on this hour? If real, spend it. If not, redirect it. Because compounding is real. There is a second-order effect almost no one discusses. When a critical mass of workers collectively withdraw a previously free input, they force employers to choose. Accept the input is gone and restructure, or pay for it explicitly through job descriptions, salary, equity, real on-call roles. Both outcomes beat the status quo. The availability norm was a market failure, a rent extracted from workers who never realized they were paying it into the dark. When workers stop paying it, the market corrects. The correction is uncomfortable for businesses built on free inputs, but discomfort is not proof the workers are wrong. It is proof the model rested on a subsidy now withdrawn. The frustrated manager is not evil. They built a workflow around an input that was free and now is not. The solution is not to restore the free input by pressure, it is to redesign around accurate costs. And the funniest second-order effect of all, the loudest voices complaining about Gen Z's unavailability often run companies that went fully remote, eliminated offices to cut costs, moved to asynchronous tools, then acted shocked that asynchronous tools were used asynchronous. You said office hours no longer apply. You handed everyone an async tool and broadcast, we do not care when you do this, just get it done. You cannot then be surprised when people take you at your word. Bring it together. The norm norm was built where it was compensated. The system that compensated it changed. The expectation did not. This created a mismatch. Gen Z's refusal is a rational response, imperfectly executed by many who opt out of a bad deal without building a better one. And the collective withdrawal triggers a market correction that benefits workers in the long run, even as it disrupts the comfortable in the short, scattering shadows across every boardroom. What do you do with this? 3 moves. First, price your availability explicitly. Never work late for free. The currency may be money, equity, a promotion with a written timeline, or rare skill access. 2% of 55,000 is $1,100 a year. If you give 100 hours for it, that is $11 an hour. Know the price before you agree. Second, build something you own with the hours you protect. Third, master the difference between strategic presence and reactive availability and invest in the former aggressively. Be the one who produces the work cited in the board deck. The vending machine is broken. You can keep feeding it in the dark, surrounded by others insisting you feed it more, or acknowledge the output never justified the input and carry your coins somewhere that truly comes. The question is not whether to stop. The question is what you will build.